We get to talk about managing stress. So managing stress, learning to cope with stress is essential to maintaining wellness. And stress has both positive and negative effects. So the positive stress, which we refer to as eustress, and the negative effects, which we refer to as distress. Now, either we control stress and manage it, or stress begins to control us and creates a lot of unhealthy issues for us as people. Right now, sources of stress, there can be environmental sources, psychological sources, which may include like frustrations, conflicts, pressures, change occurring in one's life. Frustration, basically, the idea of frustration is that frustration results from something blocking the attainment of our needs or goals. Okay. Now, how does stress affect us? When stress is not handled appropriately, it often produces like adverse physical and psychological effects, right? When we're put under stress, our bodies immediately go into what's called the fight or flight response. Okay, our body starts preparing itself to either fight this stress or to run away, which is the flight part. And in today's world, we actually have what's called freeze. So fight, flight, or freeze is now the response, because often we are faced with stressors that we can't do anything about. When our job tells us that we have to work extra hours, when we have more work than we can handle, or something happens in our life that we can't fight and we can't run away from, so we freeze. But the body still responds the same way. And the stressed brain causes a rapid hormonal release within the body, which causes this wear and tear on the body itself. Okay. Negative emotional states of anxiety and depression can often be linked to prolonged amounts of stress, or what we call chronic stress. Now, there is this personality type that actually is very effective at handling stress. We call this the hardy personality. Some people seem to be especially resilient and are better able to cope with stress than others, right? And what we see is that these individuals have specific characteristics. They have a liking for like facing a challenge in life. They have a strong sense of commitment to who they are as an individual. And they also, and this is very important, they have an internal locus of control, meaning that they understand that they have the power over how they feel and how they experience their life. And they have the power, right? The control comes from within them. Positive psychologists have developed resilience training programs in order to help individuals develop a hardy personality, because we understand that a hardy personality often comes from people's life experiences and how they handle it, how they deal with it, how they cope with the stress that comes from these stressful experiences. Now, ineffective reactions to stress, we have things like burnout, which means, if you ever heard the phrase like burning the candle at both ends, and then the candle gets to the center, burned out, right? Individuals display cynicism towards life. They become very defensive in how they handle things in life. Some people may self-medicate through like drugs and alcohol. Depending upon the stressful or traumatic situation that the person may be experiencing, they may develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Individuals may end up in a situation where they are exploited sexually, or they may end up in a situation where sexual harassment occurs, or the individual engages in sexual harassment due to the stress that they experience. Now, burnout is one of the biggest reactions to stress that we have, and often people don't even realize they're facing burnout. Sometimes people may think that they are feeling depression, when they're actually just experiencing like this burnout. The amount of stress that they are experiencing has led them to start to have very similar symptoms of depression. Okay. So burnout is a state of physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual exhaustion that is often characterized by the experience of fatigue, weakness, low energy, and feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, which is very similar to the same feelings that someone might have with depression. Please understand that striving for unrealistic high goals can lead to one's burnout, which can lead to some serious problems. And the key is that you can recognize any subtle signs of burnout. Changing the way in which you approach school or work or many aspects of life can start to prevent burnout. Instead of considering ourselves marathon runners who run long and hard until we just drop down, we should actually allow ourselves to recover after very intense periods of work. Like with school, after an intense study session, an intense week of finals, take a break, right? So prevention is easier and better than remediation, than trying to fix it once it's already happened. Preventing it is better than trying to fix it once it's happened, because it's very hard to get out of burnout once we're in it. So we have to self-care. We have to do things that help us relieve or manage the stress that we're experiencing so we don't lead to burnout. Now, drugs and alcohol, often people self-medicate whenever they experience stress. So, and it can develop addictions, right? And an addiction is a self-defeating reaction to stress that the person is experiencing. Addicts often substitute using alcohol or drugs for meaningful connections with others, for going out and experiencing life. They actually engage in drug use, okay? Other problematic behaviors are compulsive eating, gambling, shopping sprees, right? Like, they all have this self-soothing function about them. But the problem is they can create a perpetual vicious cycle that just leads to problematic and potentially destructive behaviors, all often due to not managing one's like stress that they are experiencing. And then there's PTSD. PTSD is an anxiety disorder that results from one experiencing a traumatic event. All right. These symptoms may include things like flashbacks and nightmares, avoidance of social situations and people and triggers, a certain numbing emotionally, hyperarousal, where the individual is like on edge all the time, experiencing these intrusive thoughts that just keep coming in and they can't stop them. They just keep coming in. Poor sleep, poor concentration, panic, right? Where the person just starts, like the body just starts reacting and panicking. They could be irritable and angry. They could even experience depression, anxiety, shame, guilt. Like, there's a huge list of symptoms that one can experience through PTSD. PTSD can come from things like surviving combat, surviving a natural disaster, terrorism, sexual assault, neglect, abuse, right? Like, these are many situations, and there are other causes. The two main ones are surviving combat and sexual assault. Those are the two main ones that we focus on with PTSD. That's where a lot of individuals experience all of these symptoms. Now, recovering from PTSD, like, chances of developing PTSD are diminished if help is available to the individual within the first 24 to 72 hours. Okay. Counselors, when working with somebody, must help connect a survivor's past pain and their present reality. Okay. Survivors, it is often believed that survivors need to tell their story. They need to be heard. They need to be understood. They need to be helped to process through what happened. Now, treatment approaches for PTSD. There's the holistic approach, which is looking at the body, the mind, the spirit, right? All with the goal of restoration of health and well-being. There's also individual therapy, group therapy, and support groups. There's therapies such as EMDR, which is called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It has been found to be very effective in helping people process through the emotions, process through that traumatic event. Group therapy, support, crisis intervention programs, all of these things can be very helpful in treating PTSD. Now, sexual exploitation that can occur, all right, that can actually be a stressor for an individual by experiencing this. This can include like incest or rape or sexual harassment, right? They all lead to PTSD. They all lead to stress and trauma and anxiety, okay? And all three of them involve a misuse of power and a betrayal of trust from the perpetrator. And the victims tend to be reluctant afterwards to disclose the abuse. And often there's this sense of shame and guilt and responsibility. And they blame themselves. There's a lot of this like self-blame that can occur. And male victims of sexual exploitation experience a lot of barriers in trying to actually seek help after they have been traumatized through this sexual abuse. Okay, and that does really suck. Okay, and so just something to think about, right? And it really sucks that this exists in our world, but it is very much a central cause of PTSD, a central cause of stress and trauma. Then there's also what's called vicarious traumatization. This comes from like helping professionals who may be vulnerable to experiencing vicarious traumatization through hearing about the traumatizing situations that people experience, through seeing the traumatizing situations that people experience. Okay, some symptoms they may experience are like anxiety, depression, bodily symptoms, intrusive thoughts and feelings, emotional numbing and flooding, and an increased sense of vulnerability. Very similar to PTSD symptoms. Okay, for those of you that want to go into these helping fields, like being a mental health therapist, you have to understand that you need to keep yourself safe. This could be by having your own therapist. This could be by learning certain techniques in order to process this stress or compartmentalize what is happening. And that's very important, okay, in order to actually avoid vicarious traumatization. Now, let's talk about how to effectively manage and some good constructive responses to stress. So, confront the problem directly, head on. Accurately and realistically appraise the stressful situation. Do you have the resources to actually handle the stressful situation? If you do not have the resources, is there a place you can go to get the resources? If you don't have the support system, is there something you can do to help get the support system, right? Learn to recognize and manage potentially disruptive emotional reactions to stress. So this is a regulation of our emotions when we are faced with stress. Learn to exert behavioral self-control in the face of stress. And be willing to put forth the effort in making a plan to manage your stress and then following through with that plan to help manage your stress. Another way is time management. So like time management is so important, you know, and I definitely learned more about time management when I was a college student, right? Because time management actually helped me so much to reduce the level of stress I was experiencing with like due dates and getting papers done and studying for exams, things like that, right? So when you're setting up this time management, right, establish clear and attainable goals. Decide what you can accomplish in a given frame. Don't overextend yourself, right? Before taking on new projects, consider what you already have. Often people say yes to a lot of things and they put too much on their plate, and then that causes problems, right? Keep some type of like schedule, some type of like organizer, use your phone, write it down, do something, but help yourself visually see how your time and schedule are being organized. It can help a lot. And also reach out to others if you need help, right? Like reach out to others if you need help with a certain project or a certain paper or something, right? Like reach out to others. All right, another way to constructively deal with stress is deep relaxation. So breathing is such an effective way to control these like negative feelings and experiences we have from stress. Our body needs oxygen. Oxygen comes from breathing. When we hold our breath, which we often do when we're in times of stress, then the brain and the body are not getting enough oxygen. And so we don't release what we're feeling. Okay, we don't actually increase the oxygenation in our blood, increasing it in our body, which actually helps us feel better. And instead, we often hold our breath. There are relaxation techniques like progressive muscle relaxation, which is a deep relaxation that can be practiced for like 10 to 20 minutes, where you're focusing on different parts of your body. You tense them up and then release them. Tense and then release. There's also regressive muscle relaxation, where you focus on one part and you focus on just letting it relax, and then you move to the next. This works very well if you start like at your toes and then move up until you get to your head, and it helps to actually relax each muscle, each major group, each body part, and it can help. It can help when falling asleep too. Meditation is, it's definitely something that is very useful. Research has consistently shown that people who engage in meditation often are more ready to face stressors. They face these stressors more effectively than individuals who don't. And if you think about it, meditation is a breathing exercise. It creates relaxation. It helps the body relax. It helps the body know what to do when it's faced with stressors. So meditation is very effective. And I know many people think, well, I just can't turn my brain off. Meditation is not about turning off your brain. It's about not feeding the thoughts your brain has during a specific amount of time, and focusing on your breathing and focusing on relaxing. Okay. Mindfulness. So mindfulness is an awareness of the present experience without or with acceptance. Looking at where you are, focusing on the things around you, right? Taking a walk and bringing in all of your senses and just focusing on your breathing and what you see and what you hear and what you feel, okay? Individuals train themselves to intentionally focus on their present experience with an attitude of curiosity and compassion. It requires an ongoing commitment to cultivate and practice the principles of mindfulness in every moment. Even when brushing your teeth, you can experience mindfulness. Yoga is also a great way to help with relieving stress and managing stress. It helps to create a relaxation in the body while also developing or building strength and balance, right? And it helps with the body movement. So it is very good for us as well. And then Pilates, which is a form of exercise that targets the small muscles throughout the body. All right. And it actually is through like a sequence or series of physical exercises with specific breathing techniques, all working on these small internal stabilizing muscles. And it helps the body. It strengthens the body. It also relaxes the body, and it builds that oxygenation within the body through the breathing techniques. There are things like Tai Chi, acupuncture, therapeutic massage, all of these things, right? Engaging in some type of exercise. All of these things can be helpful in managing and preparing the body to handle stress. Because the reality is stress is going to happen. Stressors are going to happen. You can't change that. But what you can do is you can start changing and preparing your body to face those stressors when they do come so that you can handle those stressors better.